Men have failed to lead their families. They have failed to father their children. They have failed to lead themselves. And something must be done. Men must be taught how to lead. Men must be taught how to father. Men must be taught how to earn, how to invest. Men must learn how to network. And men of shared values must link arms to do battle together. Recent years have shown us a different breed of man. A man who is self-governed. A man who cannot be coerced. A man who knows who he is. A man who knows who his God is. A man who is prepared for the battle ahead. The ungovernable man.
Welcome to the Men Over Mountain podcast. I'm your host, Coach Dalton, and today we have another special guest for you. This is his second time on the show, and he has made a lot of progress on his vision for men over the past year. So he's got something extremely exciting and an amazing opportunity for you that you're not going to want to miss. So watch until the end. With that being said, today we are going to comb through what it looks like to be a real man, a masculine man that is a leader and a father and a husband in today's society, and how we can start taking back this culture war. With that being said, let's get started. Gabriel, man, welcome to the podcast. I know we have been talking a lot over this past year, and a lot has changed. I know we talked a lot about where you had come from on our last podcast back in last August. So for our listeners, we're not going to dive too much into that today. We're focused on the future. We're focused on what God is doing in the now, and we're very excited about what's to come. We've got some really exciting news and some really awesome opportunity for you at the end of this podcast. So make sure you listen all the way through. Now, our first podcast was pretty long, so we're going to try to keep this one to the point, man, and keep it valuable and powerful, and really give you something to walk away with. So, with that being said, welcome to the podcast, Gabe. Once again, my friend, my homie. What has changed for you in this past year? What kind of progress have you made on your assignment?
Oh man, well, first of all, before I even get into that, thank you again for having me. And it's a privilege. And obviously, it's been really cool to get to know you over the last year. So, I mean, that a year ago, that was just the beginning of the bromance. We hadn't even met in person yet. Then we got to hang in October in Florida. That was a blast. All right. So over the last year, the most noticeable thing, or the thing that I would like to talk about most today, is what I have begun to put together for men on a national scale. And so last year I was able to really share with you my heart for men, my heart for helping them grow, my heart for helping their families grow and their businesses and their lives. But there's been a deep call inside my heart for a very long time to find a way to put strong men, strong convictions together and help them develop not only the relationships they need, but the skills that they need in order to change their lives, their families, and their communities. And so from a practical sense, what that means is I have just recently launched a national men's event called Freemen Forge. You can find everything you want to know about it on freemenforge.com. That's Freemen Forge, FORGE.com, freemenforge.com. Make sure you check that out. But essentially what I have done is put together an entire weekend, September 15th through 17th, up in beautiful Gatlinburg, Tennessee, where I am gathering nothing but the right type of men cut from the same cloth, the same DNA that says, I submit to Christ and his principles, and I submit to nothing else. In short, I've termed it, affectionately, a gathering of the ungovernable. And
Right.
what that looks like, just from a, bird's eye view, is I have put together an incredible team of teachers, coaches, speakers coming in from not only all over the country, but also internationally to help men during that weekend build the skills and the relationships they need to where when they walk out the doors, they know exactly what to do in their lives. They know exactly which step to take, and they have a community of other men that are going to help them shape the world.
Yeah, I think that there is kind of a cry out from men who have no direction, no purpose, and just are living on the day-to-day They see all the corruption and everything around us, and they don't really know what to do with it, or even who to turn to. And most men, they don't want to complain. If they do
Right.
complain, they get canceled. So, what is your perspective on kind of the corruption of today's society?
Yeah.
And, who do you think is to thank for that?
I mean, you know where I stand. It's the fault of men. It's our
Yeah,
fault. If we're the leaders of society, then it's our responsibility to maintain that society. It's also our responsibility to take responsibility for the bad things. We can't just take responsibility for the good and say that we're the leaders and we're the head of the household, and also not look at what has happened in the world and go, well, this was our responsibility because we're the shapers of society.
exactly.
Um, and so we have, by the way, one of my favorite phrases ever is tolerance is overrated. We
Mhm.
have tolerated corruption. And it's not just within our government, it begins in here. We've tolerated sin. We've tolerated separation from God. We've tolerated laziness. We've
Mhm.
tolerated complacence. We've tolerated low paychecks. We've tolerated the lifestyles that we live in. We've tolerated our wives living out of order, but more importantly, us living out of order.
Right.
And when we do that, there's an entire breakdown of everything that comes from our leadership. So the world is as it is because men have been weak, especially men of faith.
Absolutely. And I think though that, you mentioned that one quote, but I think another one is silence is complicity. And most men, they will complain and be angry about what's going on in today's society, but they also at the same time, even if they are equipped, uh,
Yeah,
there are men that, and we're not here to bash men, we're here to raise men up, but they have this idea that that's not my problem, right?
mhm,
And including myself, right? There are times where I do not want to pay the price of the confrontation, or you kind of just want to pick your battles, you know what I mean? But
sure.
we live into society now to where we can't be afraid of
Mhm.
how people view us. I've been reading a book here lately called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And
Right.
it talks a lot about the transaction that you get from being and doing and serving, right? And what you expect out
Sure.
of people rather than just doing it because that's who you are and that's what you stand for. And knowing who you are and what you stand for is extremely important, because when you stand for something, that means you are not tolerant to that thing, right? And
Right.
so, um, with that being said, like, what happens to a society where men and fathers, because I don't believe that, you don't necessarily have to have kids in order to father other men in
Mhm.
other communities and other, like, spheres of
Agreed.
influence, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
A lot of coaches like us, we are fathering people, whether, other people want to see it that way or not, which is fine with me. But what happens to a society when fathers within and without and outside of the household are absent and choose to do nothing?
You're living in it, man. I mean, this is, and the crazy thing is, this is not a surprise. Any
Yeah.
sort of data you look at history, this is what happens when you remove strong male leaders from the home, because men were designed by God to lead. We are to be a reflection of the Creator. And it starts with, like I said, our tolerance of what we don't want to deal with, tolerance of sin in our own lives. You talked about a moment ago the compromises essentially that we've been
Mhm.
willing to make and the price that has to be paid. And I think that it's really important for men to understand that for the life you want, for the future you want, there's always going to be a price to pay, and the
Mhm.
price is always going to be more than what you want to pay. Confrontation is not fun for anyone, but I love the fact that there's so many men being woken up to what's going on right now. The reality is this evil and this battle that we're seeing that's becoming very obvious to a lot of people. I mean, including you and I. I snapped in late 2019 going, oh my goodness, this is what the world is.
Right.
And I always knew it was there, but it just reared its head to the point where it's like, okay, this is no more games. This is good and evil. I have to recognize what's going on. And men are going to have to get used to, again, standing for truth, standing for principle, regardless of what comes. And that's really where a lot of it comes from. It's fear. It's fear of loss. It's fear of being ostracized, persecuted, fired. abandoned by your friends. But the reality is the truth and what is right and good is far more important than what is comfortable, what is easy. And you've got to make a choice. We're now at a place in history where making a choice is not a choice. You really don't have one. It's either you bow the knee one direction or you bow the knee the other. You will serve someone. You're either going to serve God, righteousness, and truth, or you're going to serve the commie agenda and Satanism and all the other nonsense that you're seeing right now. But that scripture, choose this day whom you will serve. There is not a man on this planet who is not serving something. Now we've been presented a choice that there is no like, well, I can stay in the middle. It doesn't exist. It never has existed in the sense that there's eternity. And when you die on this earth, you're going to go before God, and you made that choice already. It's now just becoming very obvious that the choice is simply right in front of you. You must choose. How you are living is the choice.
The Bible says that a man that serves two masters is unstable in all of his ways. So he goes to and fro with the wind and with the waves and things like that. Like he has nothing that he actually stands for. Right. And so we live in a society now where people believe that they are living their truth and their morality and their, with their values. And it's not truth. It's not moral, but we are in a culture war now where it's a thought war where people see freedom as I can do whatever I want to do, or if you read in the Satanic Bible, do what thou wilt, right? And so they believe that freedom is I should be able to do whatever I want to do with with no consequences and without regard for anyone else's life or comfort or what have you. Whereas on the Christian side, where we believe is absolute truth, right? There is an absolute morality. There is a servitude. There is the Bible says that we fight not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities of the spiritual realm, right? Yeah. And so I know we and you believe very much the same thing, but how do you believe people could find the difference between absolute truth or how do I word this even better? How do we bring the absolute truth to people who are so wavering in relative truth?
I think everything comes from leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, someone has to set the example. And that's what leadership is. Leadership is not standing and telling people how to live, telling them what to do. It's showing them how.
Yeah.
It's leading in a way where people can follow your example in your footsteps. That's the definition of fathering. I mean, what we talked about at the beginning, leadership and what we call leadership today, there was a word for it we used to have, and it was fathering. It was fathers teaching their sons. It was generational learning. It was generational fathering, where people were being shown what is the truth. How are you supposed to live? And so my answer is the best way to tell people is to show people. Words are very cheap. You can say a lot of stuff, but it's who you are and what you're doing that is actually going to communicate something to someone. And so when we're in, well, absolutely the fruit. And so I think that's the most, mind-numbingly frustrating thing at times with this whole conversation, because you're looking at two different worlds. You're looking at what we've seen over the last 3 years, whether it be sexuality, election rigging, forced medical procedures, all sorts of stuff. And the type of people that are on board with that, and riots and burning down buildings, and just all, you look at it and you go, okay, this is the life that you see right now. This is the world that you see. These are the issues that you see and the people that agree with that. And you look at it and go, and you're having a hard time differentiating between that and me over here with my peaceful family, my daughters who respect me, my wife who loves me, my money in order, my family in order, speaking with people in a, a civil way over disagreement. I look at the two and I go, this could not be more obvious. It comes down to fruit. And, I'm not going to get into the whole voting thing, whether it's irrelevant at some level. But even back, the 2020 election, you're looking at two completely different demographics of people and two different types of people. And I think a lot of people have woken up to, I don't think politics is going to save you, but you're looking at one side that is primarily based upon a certain principle, a lot of people of faith, and you look at it, you're like, okay, this is orderly, this is beautiful, this is, this is people are blue collar, these are people that work with their hands, these are people who value family. And then you've got the blue-haired nut jobs who don't know what kind of genitalia they have and are into screaming in your face and burning stuff down and punching people when you don't agree with them. To me, you can't get more obvious. I don't have to do a whole lot of showing between the two. What is truth? What is right and good, and what is not? And we're in this place now in society and in the world where people are even blinded to that. Their truth is staring them in the face, and they still can't see it. It's craziness. It really is. It's wild. People don't even believe their own eyes.
So, and that's interesting to me because I'm sitting here thinking about how, that side, I guess you would call it the opposing opinion. And I would even say the more
I'd call it evil.
Yeah, evil. Exactly.
It's evil.
The evil side of things. How are they choosing to maintain their power, whatever that power may be? So we look at like mainstream media and stuff like that, and cancellation and all that. What are they doing? They are limiting exposure to this way of living, right? It is a threat. Therefore, they limit exposure. And that's why I think this event is so important. You're inviting men to raise men up, right? To give them exposure to what it truly means to live a life that is in real freedom, which is, the Bible says, Galatians 5:1 says, it is for freedom that you have been set free. Therefore, go and do not be burdened again by a yoke of slavery, right?
Yeah.
And so I believe that this event is very much embodies that. And, at Freemen Forge, obviously, you're forging men into free men that are going to go out into society, think for themselves, and be led by God and their values and their morality with a purpose to serve their family, protect their family, and think generationally, not just about themselves, but like, what am I leaving behind and how did I affect this time in my in society, in the history of things? What imprint did I put onto this life? But and speaking of purpose and mission, I believe that every man should know their purpose and mission. And how would you describe yours?
My purpose and mission is to help men turn themselves into self-governed leaders. That is my mission. It says it right at the top of my Instagram. I help men turn themselves into self-governed leaders, or forge themselves into self-governed leaders. That's what I believe God has called us to be. If we're to be a reflection of the Creator, we're supposed to be a reflection of who God is. And we serve ultimately the King of Kings, but God has set us free. And I believe that's supposed to be across the board in every man's life. That's always the goal, is to help men get more free. It's to help men get free of spiritual bondage and understand how to hear God's voice for themselves. It's helping them establish freedom in their financial game. It's a big part of what I do with my private men's groups online, is I work with them on building their businesses and making sure that they can actually go impact the world, because you can't do it when you're broke. Helping men get set free from vice, from addiction, from lust, from you name it. Freedom is always the goal. I think, though, the important thing to note about particularly the event that we've built out in Gatlinburg for September is that this is really about helping the right type of men who are cut from the same DNA and cloth build trusted, high value relationships. And that's really where the heart of this comes from, because I can deal with guys every day. I can have multiple phone calls a day. I can have online groups and communities, and that's awesome. But one, nothing compares to getting men in person together for relationships. And I think that's important. But, I wanted to find a way to go beyond just 5 guys here, 10 guys here, a one-on-one phone call. Because the biggest thing that I found over the past few years is a significant sense of loneliness and isolation that I've had. Not because there aren't plenty of males walking around, but because I feel very lonely in the type of men I want to build the world with. There are plenty of males around. There are very few that are committed to God and say, I am submitted to the King, but I submit to nothing else. And those are the type of men I want to build with. I am no longer interested, and it doesn't mean I can't show love or kindness or generosity to people that aren't included in that. But there's a level of trust that I don't have with you simply because you have no principles, no commitments, nothing to anchor yourself to, and no line in the sand that I know you're going to stand by. I mean, over the past few years, the number of men, well, I would never do that, draw a line in the sand. You guys don't even know where their flipping line in the sand is.
Mm-hmm.
They have no concept of where their own line is. The line just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And they just keep going, okay, well, I'll just back up. And meanwhile, the opposition takes more and more and more, and we tolerate it and don't do anything about it because we've been raised to be nice. Nice, you take what you are given, you're easy to push around, versus men of conviction who are strong leaders and will take what God gave them to take. And that's what guys have to understand. This is not about just, well, I'm just going to sit here and let God do the work. Obedience is hearing the voice of God on the inside and going and doing the work because you believe that's what God gave you to do. And men are in this place of just taking what they are given because they do not believe that God can actually help them shape the world. And that's what I want to change. Men need to shape the world. They need to write history. You absolutely can change what's going on. You can shape society. But the biggest part of that, I sincerely believe, is the people that you do it with. Doing things alone is fantastic if you can do it, but the reality is nothing significant has ever been done by an individual. It's always done by a group of relationships that are knitted together with a common vision, a common purpose, a common goal. And so I am doing whatever I can to help men link arms with other men that have that warrior heart. Those are the type of men I want to serve. Those are the men I want to train. Those are the men I want to father. And those are the men I want in my life, because I will not be living. I refuse to live where I have seen the world over the past 3 years. I'm not going to do that. Not on my watch. My children are not going to live in that future. I refuse to capitulate to it. And I sincerely believe that we have the ability to shift that. Now, if we believe the scripture, we know where this thing is headed ultimately. We see it in culture, the raising of self above God. That's really what Satanism is. It's do what you want. It's an elevating of your flesh, of yourself above the principles of God and just doing whatever you want. And so I think that, you can't compete ultimately with, people sending millions of their children to public schools being raised in this nonsense. I mean, the majority of kids, that's the future you're going to grow up in is kids that are raised like that. But the big reason that's happening is because someone took the initiative to actually go and intentionally get inside those kids' heads and change things generationally. Absolutely. You're not going to be able to compete by just raising you and your little family. I love it. They're your responsibility. My primary responsibility and concern is my family. But if it stops there, that's the problem. Right. That's the problem. You've got to influence and lead other people. And so we're in this place where you choose this day whom you will serve and what you will serve. And you're going to have to draw a line in the sand. You're going to have to link arms with other men, and you're going to have to shape the world around you. We've got to impose our will and values upon the world, or the will and the values of the world will be thrust upon you and your children. And if you can't see that over the past 3 years, you've got your head in the wrong place.
And that's the thing, though, too, is that, we're looking at, I'm actually seeing a great shift in society here recently where people are getting fed up, and you've got these musical artists that are blowing up. You got a young man from out in the woods somewhere. He's off the grid. He posts a video. Maybe he sings at a fair every now and then. I think his name is Oliver. And he wrote a song recently called Rich Men North of Richmond. And
I just saw that the other day. It's actually a really cool song. I dug it.
Well, that's the only thing I see now on YouTube is people reacting to this song. And it's not made by a major studio. It's not promoted by a major studio, but people are supporting. That's right. But people are supporting this. And you look at Tom McDonald and Adam Calhoun, and they've got American flags, and they've got this major patriotic, album. And like Tom is Canadian. But he is so gung ho about the freedom of America, which he's dual citizenship, but it doesn't matter. The point is that we're starting to see with the boycotts and everything that people are willing to support those who are going to stand up against this cultural demise that we are leading ourselves into, because they see all it leads to is poverty, damnation, death, sickness. There's nothing good that comes from what they are trying to turn this place into. But as long as there
Yeah.
are victims, there will always be saviors, right?
Sure.
And,
Sure.
we're talking about being ungovernable. That also includes being independent in your household, learning how to grow your own food, learning how to hunt, learning how to make those connections and stay in a community where you can rely on one another, which is what you're
Yeah.
talking about. And,
Yeah.
with this event, what you're doing is you're equipping men to go back out into the world stronger, smarter, and giving them the tools to go out and make a more efficient difference in their
Yeah.
own spheres of influence, whether that be leading in their household, in their business, in their communities, even in politics. I know a lot of
Right.
politicians might not want to show their face or anything if they come to events like this, but um, it really does say something that
Yeah.
we are moving and we're showing some positive momentum in the right direction.
Yeah.
So we talked about um, men that are lost, right? Maybe they
Mhm.
are kind of fatherless at this particular time and moment,
Yeah.
right? What do you think the next step is for a man that might not be in that position where he has a sphere of influence, where he has a community of men, and
Yeah.
what would his next steps be if he's listening to this podcast right now and he's like, man, I wish I had people like Gabe and Dalton and an event like this. What are some resources that we can point him to start moving in the right direction?
I was talking with my wife last night. It's so funny. I'm sitting at the dinner table, and my wife has recently gone through a heart failure episode. My wife went into heart failure 9 years ago with the birth of our second child. And, a lot of women will have heart stuff come up. It's relatively common during pregnancy, but most women after pregnancy, after they deliver the baby, it goes away. My wife's, it didn't. Over the past 9 years, we've gotten her up to full heart function. And then she had a major episode Memorial Day weekend that landed her in the hospital for an extended period of time. We actually thought a heart transplant was imminent and a lot of things like that. But she is going through a healing process. And, every or 3 days a week, we take her to cardiac rehab at the hospital where she's going through monitored exercise to try to get her heart function up. And so last night we're sitting at the table and she's talking about how it's basically her and a bunch of old people at this cardiac rehab, and everybody's going, "What are you doing here?" Because everybody's, geriatric, and she's, 35 and beautiful and young and in shape. And so I think that we were sitting there at the table and she goes, "Why do people get healed? Why do they get healthy? Why do they go through that? And like, what enables them to that? What's the starting point?" It's vision. And that's what came out of her mouth. It's a vision of a brighter future.
Awesome.
And that's where everything must begin. If you don't have a vision for a brighter future and a hope for tomorrow and something to build, a purpose to be a part of, something to create, why live? And there's no point in living. And I keep using that scripture in just about every conversation that I have, is quoting it. Is scripture says that without vision, people perish.
Mm,
There's a dying on the inside. There's a dying even on the outside. There is a refusal to live and just a choice to just exist. If you don't have a vision for the future, that means you're assuming that the future is just more of what today is. You
mm,
must start with vision. And if you were to ask, I don't know, 100 men, I doubt you would get even 10 who could tell you, if you asked them, what does the future hold for you? What is your vision of the future? What do you actually want? Like, tell me about your life in 2 to 10 years. Tell me 2 years and 10 years. And by the way, this is the first exercise I have any guy do that I work with or even have a call with about potentially helping them and coaching in their life and business. As I say, I want you to tell me exactly what your life looks like in 2 years. And I want you to tell me exactly what your life looks like in 10 years. And I send them away. And this is after I'm having a call with them to even figure out if they're a fit. I'm already giving them homework. I'm not even working with them and say, in order to even consider working with you, I need to know what your vision of the future is.
awesome.
I don't know if I can help you unless I know what it is. But the real exercise here is getting you to understand that you haven't been thinking about it clearly enough.
Mm-hmm.
Most men can't do it. I'll send guys away for a couple weeks at a time. They come back and I'm like, "Did you do it?" No, man. They don't have a vision. They don't know what they want. Everybody knows they want more. Everybody knows they want better. Everybody knows
Mm,
they want more freedom, more finance, more ability to provide more for their families, more friends, more experiences. But it's very rare that you can get someone who can tell you with specificity and picture clear, clarity, What is it that you want the future to look like? Or even more important question is, what vision has God given you to walk out? And I also love the word abdication. Abdication means a dropping of responsibility in an irresponsible way, a stepping off of the throne without delegating authority to someone in an effective way. We have abdicated our responsibility to hear the voice of God to give us the vision that we need to build the future that we see.
Right.
And I love talking about this right now because my own eyes have been so open to the concept of faith. Faith is not just limited to believing in God. Faith is the ability to be obedient to a vision that only you can see without any sort of physical evidence that it's possible or exists at all. And
Absolutely.
only God can give that to you. I mean, that's why this event was born. I mean, we announced this event, I think, 7 or 8 weeks before the event is supposed to start. This has
Yeah.
been an operation in faith. I was supposed to announce this thing 3 months before it started. I announced it 2 months before it started because of what my wife was going through. But I
Yeah.
knew that what I saw was not just what I saw. It was a vision and a deep desire that God put here for
Mhm.
me to affect men's lives and affect change and tie relationships together and knit hearts and help men get organized for what is coming down the line. That has
Right.
been the vision in my heart that God gave me, and I just had to obey. And what we've seen transpire over the past couple of months of getting the word out is astounding to see the
Mhm.
type of men that are responding, the type of men that want to be a part of it. It's been incredible, but it's all come from this picture that God has given me and the faith that he's given me to walk it out and make it happen. So to answer your question, I'm sorry, long answer. First and foremost, men need a vision.
Mhm.
You need a vision. Otherwise, you have no idea what your next step is, even tomorrow morning. It's just go to
Absolutely.
work.
Well, I think there's a disconnection too, is that like where there people lose their imagination. They
Yeah.
lose that excitement about what could be. When you're growing up as a kid, you believe you can be literally whatever you want to be. And it's so weird because we live in a society now where you think you could be a carrot. And so you got people on one side thinking there can be a carrot, and you got people on the other side who can't logically step outside of the box that they put themselves in,
Yeah.
to even imagine a better life.
Yeah.
And even if they
Well,
can imagine it,
yeah.
uh, it,
Just
it,
important differentiation there
yeah.
is those people that believe they can be a carrot, they believe they can be whatever they want without paying the price to get it. And that's the difference.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm a whatever I say I am versus I am whatever I have put the action and work into becoming. And that's the difference. It's
Yeah,
faith is different than wild imagination that's just
absolutely.
nonsensical. And I think that's important for people to recognize is God's not just going to say, okay, you're it. That's it. No, he's going to require you to put in the work in faith that by you taking those actions, that he's going to fulfill his promise and help that vision come to pass. And
That's
that's the
right.
big difference.
You become the person that is able to attain the vision
Yeah.
God has put you in, by the hammer and the heat.
Yes, I
You
love
will.
that phrase, man. It's a great one. The hammer and the heat. I
So
dig it.
it takes a molding, right?
Yeah.
There's we're going to move on here in just a second to just kind of some more of the details for the event. But I wanted to get
Yeah.
this off my chest a little bit.
Yeah.
Whenever someone is making pottery, right,
Yeah.
they want it to be very fine clay, right? They
Mm-hmm.
take out all of the amenities, all of the hay, all of the particles, all of the what have you, right? All of the impurities,
Sure.
so that when they make that pottery, whenever they put it into the heat, it doesn't break because it gives it a breaking points, right? Well, God does the same thing with us. He begins to uh, help clean us up and help take away some of those things that are keeping us like in bondage and in sin and in struggle. He strengthens us, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
he molds us because he is the potter and we are the clay. And he wants us to be something beautiful and something strong and something durable and something that lasts, right?
Sure.
Something that people can look at and say, man, I wonder who made that. And, but it's not something that is overnight
Mm-hmm.
process. It's a master's work to
Yeah.
know what they are doing in making you, right? So,
Yeah.
with that being said, I want to jump right into some more of the details of Freeman Forge. What can
Yeah.
people expect? What can they walk away with? How do they participate? Where do they go to find some of the
Sure.
content, some details?
Absolutely. I mean, so start at the top, freemenforge.com, FREEMEN forge.com, freemenforge.com. Start there. By the way, while you're there, there's a quick definition of why we chose that word and that name. The old word Freeman, go look it up. It's actually FREEMAN. And the way we wrote it, MEN, is just a
Mm,
plural of that. But it has a very unique meaning from our past that I think is important to recognize. And it's basically a man who has all of the social privileges of a full-fledged citizen because of what he has earned and turned himself into. And I think that was very key to what we wanted to do, was create freemen, men who have earned their sovereignty, men who have transformed themselves into someone who can operate in that way. And so that at the very core, I think, tells you everything you need to know about the event. We are shaping and training and equipping men to walk away as free men and make that
mm,
change in their lives. Now, from the very top, I know we got a lot of believers listening just simply because that's who you speak to. This is not a church retreat. Let me make that very, very clear. This is not a standard church retreat. That's one of the reasons I did this, quite honestly, because I was so tired of the options that were given to me by the Western church to connect with other believing men in the vast majority of cases. All right.
right.
If I want to go to a church meeting in the woods for 3 days, I'll let you know. But I am there to connect with men relationally, to make incredible connections and to have an amazing experience bonding with other men. Now, we are going to talk about spiritual warfare. We're going to get heavy into that. Like I said from the very beginning, all this other stuff, the money, the family, the courses about, firearms and all that other stuff that we're doing, unless we get the thing right of hearing the voice of God for ourselves and not abdicating it to pastors, priests, books, podcasts, whoever wants to tell us what God said, we need to begin to listen to what God is saying to us. Now,
Right.
let me be clear. I'm not saying don't listen to people who have, the opportunity and the authority to speak into your life. I'm not saying God can't speak through people. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to biblical wisdom. What I'm saying is it is not the priest's or pastor's job to hear God's voice for you.
That's right.
I love the story of Samuel and Eli. Eli was a very old man who had heard from God for a very long time. But Samuel, as a boy in the temple, heard the voice of God. Eli didn't hear it. Samuel did. God spoke specifically to him. Now, Eli gave him guidance on maybe how to listen and how to respond. But ultimately, that voice spoke to Samuel, a little boy.
Hmm.
And we have to get back to that thing of, I do what God says. I don't do what the placard at the church building says. I don't do what the pastor says. I do what God says. I have one man to please. I have one
Right.
individual to please, and it is the King of Kings. So beyond that, I could talk about the features all day, and just a few of the features. Like I said, we brought in a ton of teachers and coaches and speakers to train us. And so we've got experts in all of these fields coming in to train. So we've got spiritual warfare, we've got financial and wealth warfare, we've got a course on how to increase your income and buy and start businesses. We've got resources on homeschooling. And that is one of my biggest passions, quite honestly, is getting kids out of the public school system. I'm in the process right now of opening a homeschool academy downtown in the city I live in here in North Texas. Just bought a really big property, beautiful building right next to the downtown square, almost
It's
touching
awesome.
it, where we're going to be able to pull 200 kids a week out of the public school system eventually when that thing really gets rolling. And that is a huge passion for me. I think one of the biggest issues we've got is people have abdicated, not people, men have abdicated their role and responsibility and authority of raising their children. They've abdicated that to other people. We've handed our children to Rome and expected them not to come back as Romans.
That's
And
right.
so we're going to be training people, giving them the resources they need to pull their kids out. We've got courses. We've got one called Practical Violence. We have a guy, a third-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, coming over from North Carolina. He's going to be teaching us a course on how to fight. You'll be able to sign up to fight other guys, which is great if you really want to. We've built a shoot house for close quarter combat, and we brought in a specialist where all he does is travel all over the entire country and train men how to clear homes in case their family was ever in that situation. We've got drones flying overhead this shoot house, so they'll be able to see you working your way through it. We've got sim weapons to keep that portion a lot more safe. We've got performance pistol with a speed shooter out of Tennessee named Josh Gass, who's incredible. My friend John Martin of Men in the Fray is leading our dynamic rifle course. And our VIP buyers even have access to flamethrowers and machine guns at the firing range. So we're doing so much stuff. We got a health and hormone team coming in to teach you about health and hormones in the male body, and not only just the male body, but the female body. So men can walk out understanding their women a little better, which I'm sure we could all use. But
biological level. That's awesome.
Absolutely. We want them not just being connected with their wives emotionally. We want them being connected with their wives physically. Look, men like sex. We enjoy it. I want good sex in my marriage. We want guys to walk out going, I know that my wife and I are feeling more intimate because I understand her on a more basic level. That's so right. Those are just a few of the things. And then finally, one of the things I'm most excited about, short of, hikes, log carries, and ice baths, is we brought in an award-winning chef out of Knoxville, Tennessee, who's prepared an entirely animal-based menu. There will not be a seed oil or a GMO on site. All of it's included, the food, the lodging, everything. And most importantly, I could talk about the features, but the outcomes are what are important.
That's right.
Walk out knowing how to handle your money. Walk out knowing how to pull your children from the system. Walk out knowing the next steps to take in your life to protect and provide and be prepared for whatever may come. But then walk away, and this is the big important one, walk out with a community of other men. We are not setting you up to go home with an emotional high. We are setting you up to walk away having committed to that circle of relationships that is going to hold you to a higher standard. And so every registrant, you don't just come to the thing, come to the event and walk away. You are now integrated into a community. And what that means is anybody who's a standard registration gets access for one solid month to our Freemen Forge men's online community that is really growing exponentially. And any VIP buyers, it includes a 3-month membership. Now, what that is men come into that community. You're put into a pod of smaller relationships. So you have a homeroom of guys you do life with on the daily. We've got morning and evening check-ins, accountability and habit trackers, but we've also got weekly coaching calls that are available to the entire community from the coaches that are at this event. So these coaches actually get to work with you in your everyday life on a regular basis to drive relationship and drive performance, help each other's businesses grow. And that's the part that I'm honestly most excited about, is that men get to walk away going, I now have a circle to do life with that is going to hold me to a standard and not let me stay where I'm at.
That is awesome. That is absolutely incredible, man. And I'm for one, am extremely excited because I'm going to be there.
It's going to be a good time.
You what, I don't think I've ever seen anything with this much value packed into a weekend, and this much intention and this much like purpose driven. You see some maybe niche things out there, some events where you just do guns or you just do, the spiritual warfare or what have you. But this is so compact, and it's almost like you should probably charge more, honestly.
I honestly think we could. And we've got, by the way, we have discounts out there. And I know we were going to talk about it within, this, but you have a discount that we set you up with where guys can get $250 off of a standard registration until the event sells out, which it will, and when it comes down to today, the second that this podcast drops, there will be a live coupon for people on our website where they can get $500 off of a general registration. Outside of purchasing 2 tickets or more, we are not offering that to the public anywhere. It's strictly because of this podcast. So make sure, you give people that code that I gave you, and I'd love for people to register through that, come out and join us. But yeah, we wanted to pack value in because we believe this is an investment. People are going, how much does it cost? I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's the investment. You're going to walk out with 100 times what you invest. By the way, for business owners, this is a write-off. This is a write-off for your business. We've got high-level business training. You are going to walk out having networked with men. We've got intentional networking times where we're telling men, don't just show up in your slobby nonsense. Show up looking good, with some business cards, look sharp, and have an opportunity to do some business deals, some collaborations, do some sales, have other guys meet with you, connect with you, and help your life grow. And so we want men to walk out with an incredible circle of trust that affects the rest of their lives.
That is incredible, man. Well, no one's more excited than I am, other than maybe you, because you know more than I do.
I
But
don't know. You're pretty excited, man. Those late night texts,
yeah, I've been up at like 1 a.m. just kind of thinking about like, some of those times around the fires and stuff. I know that event in Orlando, it's the non-expectant things that are the most powerful. For example, we were, me and another friend of ours was sitting out by, just by the pool, smoking some cigars and everything, and just talking to some younger men who had a bunch of questions, but they've been surrounded by a bunch of men all day long that they felt intimidated by. So they didn't ever really have that opportunity to walk, to ask those questions. And so me and our friend was just sitting out there and speaking into these men and trying to answer questions the best that we could and making the most of that opportunity. And we stayed out there till 4 a.m. in the morning.
I know, because y'all woke me up when you came back.
Yeah. We stayed there
before your 5 a.m. workout.
Look, exactly. I don't even remember if I went to sleep. Yeah. And that workout was awesome too, by the way. But anyway, like it's the things that you don't expect to walk away with that ends up being the most valuable. We're going to get a ton of value out of all the speakers, instructors, teachers, professionals from this event, but you can't even imagine the opportunity and the doors that are going to open from just being present at this event, right? Because those 4 men, they gave their life to the Lord that night, or recommitted it even, and for me, that was the most powerful portion of that event. It wasn't all the speakers and everything. Of course, I walked away with some value, but seeing the potential for someone else's like generational line to change, like, their kids are going to be different because of that night. Their grandkids are going to be different from, that night, and so that's what matters to me. It's creating a patriarch, a starting point, a cornerstone. And we as men have to make that decision now that we are going to take up the mantle. We are going to make this our problem, and we're going to come together, lock shields, and forge society and a world that our kids will grow up in that
Absolutely.
that's worth living, and it's glorifying God. But with that being said, man, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of, plug your Instagram or your email or what have you if people have questions. Also, for those that are wanting to purchase a ticket, go to freemanforge.com, and you can use the coupon code Yateman, YEATMAN 250. Or if you are listening to this the day of, I will put the other code, the listener only code, in the description.
Yateman 500. So for the day that this podcast drops, there's a coupon for 500 off, and that's just Yateman 500, YEATMAN 500 at checkout, and that'll take $500 off the cost of the ticket. And by the way, just in talking about cost of ticket, I know that this is a big thing for guys. Is look, it's money. I understand that, but the bottom line is you've got to invest something to get something. The life that you want, the vision for the life that you want, is going to cost you something. And guess what? It's always going to cost you more than you want to pay. Yeah. Because it's more than you have. All right. And so this is not about spending money. This is about an investment into your future. The past 4 years, you've been saying to yourself, where are the men like me? Where are the men like me? I can't find anyone like me. This room is nothing but men like you.
That's right.
That's all it is. That's what we built this upon. It's a gathering of the ungovernable. It's a gathering of the warrior-hearted man. Do not let a couple of grand get you stuck where you're at for another 10 years. This is a key to getting you out of where you're at and elevating your life. And so I think it's important for people to recognize that it's the planting of the seed. And if you walk in looking to get your investment out, you will find it. You will have it. But don't let that stop you from having what you can have. trust me, man, I put off investing in myself for years, whether it be coaches or anybody else. And I'm going, well, I don't have the money right now. I can't come up with 10 grand right now. I can't come up with 20 grand right now. I will tell you right now, a decade of suffering in the place you are at is worth millions.
Yeah.
Not 10 grand, not 20 grand. It's worth millions. I'm not interested in wasting another 10 years of my life. And so I invest in myself to help myself not only get the knowledge and skills, but the relationships that will forever change the trajectory of my life and yours.
That's exactly right. Well, man, I want to thank you so much for coming back onto the podcast. And, I don't know, we might have another podcast after the event to kind of recap some of the stuff and
Maybe.
and just maybe and just talk about some of the things that maybe we didn't expect, or some of the most powerful points within the event. But man, I'm always excited to talk with you. I'm always excited to see what God is doing in a like-minded brother's life, and you're inspiring. And I love to see my brother winning. I love to see us locking shields and just fighting against evil together, man. And with that being said, thank you all so much for joining today's podcast. Just as a reminder, you can find him on Instagram at Freemen Forge.
You can find Freemen Forge. So the event is at Freemen Forge, and mine on Instagram is at Forger of Men. Reach out to me.
Forger of Men. Shoot him a DM. Ask him some questions if you got some. And, I'll look forward to seeing you in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So with that being said, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, whatever button there is, wherever you're listening, to make sure you don't miss another episode. And I'm looking forward to this event. God bless y'all. Have a good day.